When my daughter-in-law told a boardroom full of investors that I was useless, I smiled. Honey, I've been underestimated for 40 years and I've learned that sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from, because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory conveyor belt. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm 68 years old, a widow, and according to Chloe, my ever-so-brilliant daughter-in-law, apparently expired stock. That's what she implied at least. She said in front of 20 people wearing tailored suits and Rolex watches, "We need young minds, not retirement home candidates." And they laughed. Oh, they laughed as if I were some prop dragged into the meeting to fill a seat. But what Chloe didn't know, what not one of them realized, was that the gray-haired woman sitting quietly at the end of the polished mahogany table owned 51% of the company they were all so desperate to impress. Let me rewind. 30 years ago, my husband Robert and I started Whitfield Dynamics in our garage. Yes, the cliché garage story, except our garage was drafty, full of spiders, and smelled like paint thinner. Robert handled the code, the engineering, the visionary ideas. I handled the books, the contracts, the messy negotiations with suppliers who thought they could shortchange us because we were nobodies. Together we built something real. But the thing about being the supportive wife in the 90s? Nobody remembers the invoices you chased, the late-night balance sheets, the taxes filed correctly that kept the wolves from the door. They remember the man with the idea, not the woman who kept the lights on. I swallowed that reality for decades, telling myself it didn't matter who got the applause as long as we kept climbing. Fast forward. Robert dies 5 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden, brutal, the kind of call you get at 2:17 a.m. that snaps your life in two. The house went silent, the boardroom went louder, and I did what widows are supposed to do. I wore black, I stayed quiet, and I let the men run their show. Or so they thought. Because Robert wasn't a fool. Before he died, he updated the ownership documents. Every share, every option, every voting right, signed, sealed, delivered, to me. He didn't announce it. He didn't put it in the company newsletter. He slipped it into the safe deposit box with a note in his handwriting. "You built this as much as I did. Don't ever forget that." For 5 years I let Daniel, my son, and his charming wife Chloe play dress-up COs. I nodded politely in meetings, I sipped my water, I signed things without making a fuss. Let the kids feel important, I told myself. Let them think they're running the show. But power, real power, is quiet until it needs to roar. And then came last Tuesday. Boardroom, 11:07 a.m., 3rd floor of the Whitfield Tower. Chloe, in her designer blazer that probably cost more than my first car, clicked her slides with too much enthusiasm. She was pitching some half-baked youth innovation initiative, waving around buzzwords like fresh blood and generational pivot. Everyone pretended to be riveted, but I could see Parker, the CEO, checking his watch. Then Chloe looked straight at me, smiled like a cat with a bird in its mouth, and dropped her line. "With all due respect, this company can't move forward if we keep dragging dead weight. We need young minds, not retirement home candidates." Dead weight. Retirement home candidate. My knuckles whitened around the armrest of my chair. Daniel stared at the table, avoiding my eyes. A few junior investors chuckled nervously, like hyenas sniffing blood. I could have snapped back right then. I could have thrown the ownership documents across the table and watched the color drain from her face. But I didn't. Because revenge, honey, is an art. And art requires timing. So I smiled. Just smiled. Let the room think I'd been gutted. Let Chloe bask in her cleverness. She thought she had won the moment, but what she didn't know was that she had already lost the war. When the meeting adjourned, she strutted out ahead, heels clicking like victory drums. I walked slower, my hand brushing the leather strap of the laptop bag slung across my shoulder. Inside that bag wasn't just a computer. It was a nuclear button waiting. That night, in the quiet of my study, I opened Robert's file again. The share certificates gleamed under the lamp. 51%. Not 49. Not half. Majority. Control. And in that moment I whispered to his picture on the mantel. "They laughed today, Robert. But tomorrow I'll remind them who owns this house." So if you're watching this, don't blink. Because the widow they dismissed as retirement home stock is about to flip the board. And honey, when I flip it, the pieces don't just scatter, they shatter. The thing about masks, honey, is that they always slip in the heat. And Chloe's mask didn't just slip that Tuesday morning. It shattered. The boardroom was colder than usual. The kind of artificial chill that makes you wish you'd brought a thicker cardigan. But Chloe didn't notice. She thrived under fluorescent light, preening in front of the PowerPoint screen as if it were a mirror made just for her. She was 36, with the polished confidence of someone who'd never been told no for long. She had Daniel, my son, wrapped around her manicured finger. And she thought she had the company too. Her presentation started innocently enough. Charts, buzzwords, a few statistics cherry-picked from some consulting report. Innovation. Disruption. Youth capital. Each word rolled off her tongue like she'd practiced in front of the mirror for weeks. Parker, RCO, nodded politely, though I caught him shifting in his chair. Investors glanced at their phones under the table. Then came the moment. At exactly 11:07, Chloe clicked to a slide labeled Barriers to Growth. And there, bold as brass, was a bullet point that read, Outdated Leadership Mindset. She turned, laser pointer in hand, and let it hover over me. With all due respect, she began, always the prelude to an insult, isn't it? This company can't move forward if we keep clinging to retirement-era perspectives. We need young minds, not retirement home candidates. The room stilled for half a second. Then the laughter came. Not roaring laughter, but sharp, stifled chuckles, the kind that sting worse because they're trying to sound polite. A junior associate covered his mouth, shaking. One of the investors actually slapped the table as if she'd delivered the punchline of a late-night monologue. I sat there, spine straight, eyes fixed on Chloe. My face gave nothing away. But inside, every nerve was burning. Retirement home candidate. Let me tell you something, honey. I may be 68. My hair may be silver. My hands may carry the wrinkles of decades of hard work. But useless? Dead weight? I've balanced more ledgers and negotiated more contracts than that woman has had hot dinners. Daniel, my son, sat 2 seats down. He stared at the conference table like it might offer an escape hatch. He didn't defend me. Didn't say a word. His silence was as loud as Chloe's insult. When the meeting wrapped, Chloe strutted out first, heels clacking like gunfire. The others followed, whispering, smirking, shaking her hand as though she'd just cemented her place as the new visionary. I walked last. Slow. Deliberate. The leather strap of my laptop bag pressed against my shoulder, heavy not with weight but with power. Outside the boardroom, Chloe intercepted me in the hallway. She plastered on her sugar-sweet smile, the one she used at family dinners when she wanted to mask her contempt. Eleanor, don't take it personally, she cooed. It's just business. The future belongs to those who can adapt. I tilted my head, studying her like a specimen under glass. Adapt? I asked softly. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Look, Daniel and I are doing what's best for Whitfield Dynamics. You had your time, but this is ours now. You can stay on the board, of course, but ceremonial only. Think of it as a graceful exit. Graceful exit. She was carving my gravestone with words. I smiled back just enough to make her think I'd accepted defeat. Thank you, Chloe. That's very clear. Her eyes glittered with triumph as she turned away. She thought she'd won. She thought I was nothing but a nameplate collecting dust. But masks, honey, remember? They shatter. And hers had just revealed the true face. Greedy, arrogant, careless. That evening, I sat in my study, Robert's picture on the mantel, the city lights flickering through the window. I replayed every word Chloe had said, every laugh that echoed in that boardroom. And I opened the safe deposit envelope once more. 51%. Majority. Control. They thought I was a ceremonial relic. But what they didn't know is that the relic holds the deed to the temple. I whispered to Robert's photo. She wants me out? Watch me walk back in with all the keys. Because family may forget. Children may betray. But numbers don't lie. 51 beats 49 every single time. And soon, Chloe would learn that the woman she dismissed as retirement stock was the only shareholder who mattered. By the time I left that boardroom, honey, I wasn't just walking down the marble hallway of Whitfield Tower. I was walking straight into humiliation. The echo of Chloe's words clung to me like smoke. Retirement home candidate. Everyone had laughed, and the sound followed me even as I stepped into the elevator. The mirrored doors closed, and for a second I saw myself through their eyes. A silver-haired widow in a cardigan, holding a laptop bag like a shield she didn't know how to use. The irony? Inside that bag sat proof that I was the only person in that building who actually held control. But the world didn't know that. Not yet. I didn't go home that night. Home felt hollow since Robert passed. The big house with its polished floors and silent rooms only amplified the sting of being called useless. So I checked into a motel on the edge of town. $62 a night, cash up front. The clerk barely looked up from his crossword as he handed me a key card. Room 214 smelled like mildew and despair. The comforter was thin, patterned with faded flowers that had long since lost their bloom. The air conditioner rattled like it was coughing out its last breath. And the bathroom mirror, harsh fluorescent bulb buzzing overhead, reflected every line, every crease, every mile I'd walked in my 68 years. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the crisp envelope Chloe had shoved into my hand earlier that week. For incidentals, she'd said. $200. As if I were a charity case. As if 30 years of sweat and sacrifice could be reduced to 200 in petty cash. I laid the bills on the nightstand, smoothed them flat, and stared at them. That money was supposed to humiliate me, to remind me I had no power. But instead it became tinder. Every glance at those bills lit the fire hotter. At 9:42 p.m. I pulled out Robert's folder again. The ownership certificates gleamed under the dim motel lamp. 51%. My name. Eleanor Whitfield. Majority shareholder. It was real. It was mine. So why was I sitting in a motel room that smelled like wet carpet being treated like garbage? Because I'd let them believe the lie. I'd let them think I was a relic. I'd played quiet widow for too long. I thought back to the early days. Robert and I hunched over our garage workbench, soldering wires, eating stale pizza at midnight, dreaming bigger than our paychecks. Nobody called me useless then. Nobody dared. I was the one haggling with suppliers, balancing the books, keeping creditors at bay. I was the backbone. And backbones don't retire. They hold the whole damn body up until the last breath. Around midnight I tried to sleep, but the springs in the mattress dug into my ribs. The laughter from that boardroom wouldn't leave my head. Every chuckle felt like a nail hammered into my chest. Finally I sat up, flicked on the lamp, and whispered aloud. No more. Those two words changed everything. At 1:17 a.m., I scribbled a plan in the motel's complimentary notepad. Step 1. Call Ms. Avery, Robert's old lawyer, the one person who knew the truth about those shares. Step 2. Lock down every account, every asset, every voting right with my name on it. Step 3. Let Chloe and Daniel squirm. I fell asleep at 3:08 a.m., notebook on my chest, the sound of the rattling AC like a war drum in the dark. The next morning the motel coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but I drank it anyway. Fuel. My phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from Daniel. No voicemails. Coward. At 9 a.m. sharp I dialed Ms. Avery. Her voice, calm and steady, wrapped around me like armor. Eleanor, I've been waiting for this call. You're ready, aren't you? Ready? Honey, I wasn't just ready. I was done being a pawn. I glanced one last time at the $200 on the nightstand. I left it there when I checked out. A tip for housekeeping. A message to Chloe. Affordable. That's what she thought my worth was. That's what she thought my silence would cost. But silence was over. By noon I was sitting in Avery's office, sunlight spilling across polished wood and stacks of legal briefs. I slid the envelope across her desk, my hands steady. She flipped through the documents, nodded once, and said the words that would change the game. Eleanor, you own this company. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just smiled. Because, honey, humiliation is a powerful fuel. And nothing burns hotter than the fire lit by betrayal. By the time I sat across from Ms. Avery, I wasn't Eleanor the widow anymore. I was Eleanor Whitfield, majority shareholder in a multi-million-dollar company. And honey, the world was about to remember my name. Ms. Avery adjusted her glasses and spread the documents across her mahogany desk. The sun caught the embossed seal on the stock certificates like it was spotlighting my resurrection. Eleanor, she said, voice calm but sharp, Robert didn't just leave you 51% of Whitfield Dynamics by accident. He structured this very deliberately. He knew what kind of fight might come after he was gone. Her words tightened something in my chest. Robert. That brilliant, stubborn man. Even in death he was still playing chess 3 moves ahead. Avery slid a folder across the desk. Here's the amended shareholder agreement. Dated 2 years ago. Signed, witnessed, notarized. He wanted to make sure no one, not even Chloe and Daniel, could contest it. I traced Robert's signature with my finger. It was neat, precise, the same looping I'd seen on birthday cards, mortgage papers, and napkin doodles. For a moment my throat tightened. This wasn't just ink. It was Robert's last insurance policy for me. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Avery folded her hands. Because he wanted you to have the choice. If you wanted to sit quietly, let Chloe and Daniel run things, you could. But if they disrespected you, she gave me a small, knowing smile. You'd have the hammer. The hammer. Oh honey, Chloe had no idea how hard it was about to drop. I flipped through the agreement. Every line was a revelation. 51% voting rights vested solely in me. Any attempt to sideline me voided by automatic forfeiture clauses. A trust provision naming me as the final arbiter if the board fractured. Robert had built me a fortress disguised as paperwork. Then Avery leaned in. There's one more clause. She pulled a single sheet from the back. My stomach flipped at the bold header. Behavioral condition of heirs. I read aloud. Any heir who disrespects or attempts to diminish the role of Eleanor Whitfield in her capacity as shareholder shall forfeit their voting shares to her. Silence. Then I laughed. A short, sharp bark that startled even me. You mean Chloe's little performance at that board meeting just handed me her shares? Exactly, Avery confirmed. Her retirement home candidate comment? Publicly documented. Witnesses, minutes, even a recording. That clause was Robert's way of saying, respect my wife or lose everything. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Chloe had mocked me out loud, not realizing she was tearing up her own golden ticket. My mind spun with the implications. Chloe didn't just forfeit her influence, she'd handed me complete control. I wasn't just a majority shareholder anymore. I was the company. Avery must have seen the fire in my eyes because she gave a slow nod. What do you want to do next, Eleanor? You hold all the cards. I thought about the boardroom, about the smirks, the condescension, the way Daniel hadn't met my eyes while Chloe delivered her little speech. I thought about the laughter that followed me into that elevator, echoing like a taunt. First, I said, my voice steel, I want the accounts frozen. Every dollar they've been skimming, every expense they've justified as consulting fees, I want it locked down. Let's see how confident Chloe feels when her credit cards bounce at dinner. Avery smiled. Operation Justice? The name slid into place like destiny. Exactly. Operation Justice. By 3:15 p.m. calls had gone out to the banks. By 4 o'clock, Daniel's corporate card was declined at a steakhouse downtown. By 4:30 Chloe was blowing up my phone. At 5:02 her name flashed on my screen. I let it ring twice, then answered. Mom, what the hell is going on? The accounts are frozen. The board's in chaos. Did you do this? I let the silence stretch before replying. Hello, Chloe. I'm sitting in Ms. Avery's office. You remember her, your father's lawyer? The one who read the real shareholder agreement. Dead silence on the line. Then a shaky laugh. Mom, you're confused. You don't understand how these things work. Just let Daniel handle it. No, sweetheart, I cut in. You don't understand. Your father understood. That's why he left me the power. That's why he wrote clauses that stripped you of everything the moment you opened your mouth. You can't, she started. Watch me. The words landed like a gavel. For the first time in years I felt the full weight of my voice. I ended the call, dropped the phone on Avery's desk and leaned back in my chair. The laughter from that boardroom had finally been drowned out by a different sound. The silence of Chloe realizing she'd just lost everything. Avery lifted her pen. So, Mrs. Whitfield, shall we prepare for a formal takeover? I smiled. Yes, we shall. It's about time they learned who really built this empire. Because, honey, they thought I was finished. But Robert had left me the blueprint for victory. And I was done playing nice. By the next morning, Operation Justice was in full swing. At 8:05 a.m. the first email confirmation arrived. Corporate bank accounts locked, credit lines suspended, all outgoing transfers flagged for review. By 9:17 I had confirmation that Chloe's Amex, yes, the one she used like a magic wand, had been declined at a boutique downtown. And by 10:42, Daniel's platinum card bounced during a client lunch. Oh honey, the irony was so perfect it was almost comical. The two of them who had sneered about me being too fragile to manage money, now couldn't buy a cup of coffee without my permission. Ms. Avery called it standard procedure. I called it poetic justice. At 11 o'clock sharp, my phone lit up with Chloe's name. I let it ring twice, then answered, calm as a Sunday morning. Mom, she snapped, her voice already frayed. What did you do? The banks are calling, the accounts are frozen. This is insane. I let the silence breathe, then said sweetly, hello, Chloe. I'm sitting here with Ms. Avery. You remember her, your father's attorney? She just read me the real shareholder agreement. Dead quiet. Then Chloe tried her usual trick. Laughter laced with condescension. Mother, you're confused. You don't understand the complexity of these things. Daniel will explain. No, Chloe. I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. For 40 years I let men explain things to me, your father, Daniel, every smug executive in that boardroom. But this doesn't need explaining. It needs enforcing. And that's exactly what I'm doing. There was a sharp intake of breath. You can't actually believe. Believe. I said, leaning forward. Chloe, I don't need to believe. I own 51%. And thanks to your little retirement home candidate speech, you forfeited what little you had left. Her voice rose shrill. That clause isn't enforceable. Daniel says a lot of things, none of which matter. Do you want to hear what does matter? The board minutes. The recording. Every witness who heard you humiliate me. It's all evidence. And it all means your shares revert to me. For a moment I thought she'd scream. But instead she shifted gears, her tone softening into syrup. Mom, listen. We didn't mean it like that. You know how stress affects people. Daniel and I were just trying to position the company for the future. We need young blood, you know. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. And yet it's the old blood, my blood, that built this company from a garage. Funny how that works. She tried again. Let's meet. We can figure this out privately. No need to involve lawyers or banks. Oh, sweetheart, I said, my voice low, dangerous. We're way past privacy. This is business now. And business means consequences. Before she could respond, I ended the call. By 1:30 p.m. my phone was buzzing again. Daniel this time. Eleanor, he began, smooth as ever, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Actually laughed. Daniel, when fraud, disrespect, and asset theft pile up in a neat little package, we don't call that a misunderstanding. We call that evidence. He coughed, regrouping. You don't want to damage the company's reputation with a messy fight. Investors spook easily. If we work together, we can resolve this quietly. Quietly. I snapped. You threw me out of my own house. You stood by while your wife called me useless in front of a boardroom full of people. And now you want quiet. Think about the grandchildren, he said, his voice dipping into the manipulative register I'd heard too many times. Do you really want them to watch their family torn apart? That was the moment. The line that broke something clean inside me. Family. I said, my voice cutting like steel. Daniel, family doesn't throw you out of your house. Family doesn't mock you for your age. Family doesn't steal from you with a forged smile. That's not family. That's DNA. There was a long pause. Then he muttered, you'll regret this. I leaned back in Avery's leather chair, savoring the power in my chest. No, Daniel. You'll regret underestimating me. You wanted a quiet, helpless widow. Instead, you got the majority shareholder. Watch me. I ended the call, my hands steady, my heart steady. At 3 p.m. Miss Avery raised her glass of water in a mock toast. Well, Mrs. Whitfield, it seems Operation Justice is officially underway. I smiled, cold and satisfied. Let the games begin. Because, honey, they thought the pawn would step off the board. But the pawn had just become the queen. By Friday evening, the board wasn't the only thing frozen. The air around Chloe and Daniel was thick with panic. Their phones were buzzing like hornets, investors demanding answers, vendors demanding payments. And then, well, honey, then came the knock at their door. 8:32 p.m. sharp. The neighbor said they saw two black SUVs pull up outside Chloe's pristine colonial. Out stepped detectives in dark suits, badges glinting in the porch light. Chloe had just set out her wine glasses when the doorbell rang. He thought it was friends coming for dinner. It was the police. Mrs. Hayes? Mr. Hayes. You're under arrest for attempted shareholder fraud and elder financial abuse. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. Miss Avery called me 30 minutes later, her voice buzzing with a mix of outrage and satisfaction. They've been taken into custody. Chloe was still in her cocktail dress, screaming about mistakes. Daniel tried to talk his way out of the cuffs. I poured myself a glass of Pinot and raced it to no one. To justice, I whispered. By the next morning, Chloe's perfect blowout was plastered across the local news. Prominent tech couple arrested in elder abuse scheme. Her mascara streaks were visible even in the grainy mugshot. Daniel's smile, the one he used to charm investors, looked more like a grimace. Their bail hearing was brutal. Chloe, $50,000. Daniel, $150,000. Thanks to his colorful history of creative accounting, the DA had been sniffing around for years. And honey, here's the part that still makes me laugh. They didn't have access to a single dime. By Sunday, the storm hit my doorstep. At 11:15 a.m., a chauffeur-driven Mercedes rolled up my driveway. Out stepped Eleanor Hayes, Daniel's mother, wrapped in pearls and entitlement. She didn't even knock, just glided into my foyer like she owned the place. "Margaret," she said, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. "We need to discuss this situation rationally." I folded my arms. "Situation? Your son and my daughter tried to steal everything I own." Eleanor perched herself on my sofa like it was a throne. "Kevin made some poor choices, obviously, but prosecuting him seems vindictive. Think of the grandchildren." There was that same poisoned carrot they always dangled. The grandchildren. Vindictive. I said, my laugh sharp. Forging documents to throw a 68-year-old woman into the street is vindictive. What I'm doing is called accountability. Her smile didn't falter. "Let's not play semantics. We can make this disappear. My family is prepared to compensate you generously. $2 million in exchange for dropping the charges." I sipped my coffee. $2 million to forgive a theft of 33? Her pearls glittered as she leaned forward. Final offer. Think carefully. This trial will be ugly. Do you really want your late husband's company dragged through the mud? But there was the threat beneath the velvet. "What exactly are you implying?" I asked. Eleanor's eyes hardened. "Your Robert wasn't as clean as you think. We've come across records. Shell companies. Payments that don't add up. It would be unfortunate if all that became public." I set my cup down carefully, the porcelain clink echoing like a gunshot. "Are you threatening me with my dead husband's ghost?" "Not a threat," she said, rising gracefully. "A reality. Take the $5 million, drop the charges, and everyone walks away intact." I walked her to the door, every step steady. "Mrs. Hayes, tell your son this. I've lived long enough to know when I'm being blackmailed. And I've also lived long enough not to care. This is bigger than money. This is about dignity." Her expression cracked just for a second before she slid her mask back on. "Then you leave me no choice." I closed the door behind her, locking it with a final click. By 6:45 that evening, Miss Avery and Detective Ramirez were in my living room. I repeated Eleanor's words, every syllable sharp. Ramirez's eyes narrowed. "They're escalating. We'll dig into Robert's records. But don't let their threats shake you. They're cornered animals. And honey, that's exactly what Chloe and Daniel were. Cornered. Which makes them dangerous." When I finally crawled into bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, Robert's side still empty after all these months. I whispered into the dark. "You planned for this, didn't you? You knew they'd try." The house creaked. Maybe it was just the wind. Or maybe it was Robert answering, reminding me I wasn't alone in this fight. Because the war wasn't over. The arrests were just the opening shot. The real battle, the one that would expose every secret, every lie, was still ahead. And I was ready. The Monday after Chloe and Daniel's arrest, I woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, pressing silence of a storm gathering right outside your door. At 9:12 a.m., Ms. Avery arrived with a file box so heavy she needed help from her clerk to carry it in. She set it on my kitchen table and exhaled. "Eleanor," she said, adjusting her glasses, "I need you to prepare yourself. Robert's records, they're not as clean as we thought." My hands tightened around my coffee mug. "What do you mean not clean?" She opened the box, pulling out ledgers, contracts, wires. Names of shell companies. Payments to addresses that didn't exist. Transfers in round numbers that screamed laundering. "This isn't speculation," she said quietly. "Robert moved millions through fronts that tie back to some very unsavory people. If the DA or FBI digs deeper, They'll classify these funds as proceeds of crime. That means seizure. The house, the assets, even your inheritance, they'd all be at risk. The room spun. For decades, I'd painted Robert as a stubborn genius, not a criminal. Had I really been so blind? At 9:47, the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Mother, Chloe's voice slithered through the line. He sounded calmer now, dangerous. I think you've discovered what Daniel and I already knew. My grip tightened. What the hell are you talking about? Daddy wasn't some saint. He was laundering money through Whitfield Dynamics for years. Daniel saw it in the numbers the moment he joined the board. That's why we had to act. To protect the company, to protect the family. I nearly laughed, sharp and bitter. Protect? By forging documents and stealing from me. You don't get it, she hissed. If you press this case, you'll drag Robert's name through the mud. The government will seize everything. You'll be left with nothing. Unless. The pause was deliberate, a hook baited with venom. Unless what? I demanded. Unless you cooperate with us. Drop the charges. Work with Daniel's legal team. In exchange, we'll broker a deal with the feds. You keep the house, a portion of the assets, say $5 million. We all walk away with our dignity intact. I couldn't help it. I barked a laugh so sharp it startled even me. Dignity. You told a 68-year-old woman to find somewhere else to die. You threw me out like garbage. And now you think I'll join your scheme? You don't have a choice, Chloe snapped. You think the FBI will go easy on you when they realize you've been living off dirty money for years? They'll say you were complicit. They'll paint you as his partner. You'll lose everything, Mother. Everything. The line went dead. For a long time I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at Robert's files spread across the wood. My whole life, my marriage, my sacrifices, had it all been built on a lie? At 11:05 a.m., Ms. Avery called in a private investigator. Carol Chin, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in financial crimes. By noon, Carol was in my study, scanning documents with a portable scanner. By 2:40 she looked up, her face grim. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm afraid it's true. At least 10 years of systematic laundering. Payments funneled through fake consultancies, then washed into legitimate contracts. If this surfaces, it's not just Robert's legacy, it's your future at stake. I felt the air leave my lungs. So Chloe was right? Carol shook her head. Not exactly. She's weaponizing the truth. But there's one thing she doesn't know yet. I leaned in, desperate. What's that? Carol's lips curved into the faintest smile. If Robert did this under FBI supervision, he wasn't laundering, he was investigating. But we'll need proof. Proof. The word rang in my head like a bell. At 4:12, Chloe texted again. Think carefully. Daniel meets with the feds tomorrow at 10. Our deal goes away if you don't cooperate. I stared at the message, then at the files. Choice? No. This wasn't a choice. This was a trap. But I wasn't the pawn anymore. I was the queen. And queens don't panic, they plot. I called Carol back into the room. Find me the truth. Find me every scrap that shows Robert wasn't dirty, that he was working with someone bigger. And find it fast. Because honey, if Chloe wanted to use Robert's secrets as a weapon, I'd make damn sure it blew up in her face. And if the truth was darker than I feared, well then I'd take that darkness, own it, and turn it into my weapon instead. Because one thing Chloe never learned is this. Pawns survive the board. Queens own it. The morning of the meeting, I woke up with fire in my veins. Chloe thought she had me cornered, honey, but she forgot one thing. I've spent nearly 70 years surviving storms, betrayals, and men who thought they were smarter than me. You don't survive that long without learning how to strike when it matters. At 7:15 a.m., Agent Martinez from the FBI sat across my dining table. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. She slid a small device across the wood. Mrs. Whitfield, if you're willing, we'd like you to wear a wire tonight. We need Chloe and Daniel on record, pressuring you to join their scheme. I didn't hesitate. Tape it to my chest. Let's give them enough rope to hang themselves. By 8:30 p.m. my living room was staged like a trap. A lamp glowed warm in the corner, Robert's old leather chair waiting for me. Outside, 2 black sedans idled quiet as shadows. Agents sat in the driveway, radios humming softly. At exactly 8:47 the knock came. 3 quick raps, Chloe's impatient rhythm. I opened the door. Chloe swept in, still in her tailored blazer, but her face was drawn, her eyes darting. Daniel followed, briefcase in hand, every inch the slick banker. He set it on my coffee table like a peace offering. "Mom," Chloe began, her voice syrupy. "We're here to fix this. No more fighting." "Fix," I repeated, lowering myself into Robert's chair. "That's a generous word for blackmail." Daniel opened the briefcase with the smoothness of a magician revealing a trick. Inside, neatly stacked documents. Immunity agreements. Settlement terms. You keep the house, $5 million in clean assets. We all walk away. No one digs further into Robert's extracurriculars. Clean assets, I said, letting the phrase roll in my mouth. That's an interesting choice of words. Chloe leaned forward, her hands clasped like she was begging. "Mother, this is your best option. If you push this, the FBI will find everything. The laundering, the shell companies. They'll seize it all. You'll be left with nothing." I let my gaze linger on her, steady as steel. "And what do you two get out of this?" Daniel's smile sharpened. "We clear our names. Our reputations remain intact. Chloe avoids prison. Investors don't panic. Everybody wins. Everybody except me." I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "Tell me, Daniel, when exactly did you discover Robert's extracurriculars? Before you married my daughter? Or after you decided to forge documents and steal from me?" For the first time his composure cracked. "That's irrelevant." "On the contrary," I said, voice low, "it's very relevant. Because if you knew about it before, you're complicit. And if you only found out while committing fraud, well, that makes you remarkably unlucky." Chloe's hands trembled. "Mom, please. Just sign the papers. We can't fight the FBI. None of us can." I smiled. A slow, cold smile. "Sweetheart, the FBI isn't who you should be worried about." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" That's when the front door burst open. 3 agents swept in, guns holstered but presence undeniable. Agent Martinez led them, her voice ringing like a gavel. "Chloe Hayes, Daniel Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder financial abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness." The briefcase clattered shut as Daniel jumped to his feet. "You can't. This is entrapment." Martinez snapped her cuffs open. "No, Mr. Hayes. This is evidence." Chloe turned to me, her face pale, mascara streaking. "Mom, how could you?" I stood slowly, the wire warm against my skin. "The same way you could tell me to find somewhere else to die. Except my way is legal." They cuffed Daniel first. He twisted, his voice dropping into a threat. "You don't understand what you've done. Robert was tied to people who won't appreciate federal attention. You've put yourself in danger." Martinez paused. "Mr. Hayes, are you threatening a federal witness?" He smirked. "I'm warning her about reality." "Then consider this another charge," Martinez said flatly. As they led the two of them out, Chloe looked over her shoulder, broken. "Please, think of the children." I met her gaze without flinching. "I am. They deserve to know what happens when you destroy family for greed." The door shut behind them and silence filled the room. Real silence this time. Not fear, not humiliation. Power. Martinez sat back down across from me, sliding a thicker folder onto the table. "Mrs. Whitfield, there's something you need to know about Robert. Something that changes everything." I braced myself. "Your husband wasn't just laundering money. He was an FBI informant. For 12 years he provided intelligence on organized crime families while appearing to facilitate their operations. The funds he left you, yes, they were real, but they were also authorized payments for his cooperation. Legally clean. Ironclad." The world tilted. For months I'd wondered if my whole life was built on lies. But Robert had been playing a deeper game than even I realized. "So, the inheritance is safe?" I asked, my voice unsteady. Martinez nodded. "Safe, legitimate, and yours. Chloe and Daniel tried to blackmail you with half a truth. But the full truth exonerates Robert, and secures everything he left you." I sank back into Robert's chair, tears burning but refusing to fall. "The irony was so perfect," I whispered. "It was almost poetic." Martinez gave me a small, genuine smile. "Mrs. Whitfield, you've been underestimated your whole life. Tonight you proved them all wrong." I poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite scotch, raised it in the empty room and let the burn remind me. The pawn had become the queen. And honey, the board was finally mine. The morning after Chloe and Daniel were led away in handcuffs, my house felt different. Lighter. 4 months, it had been filled with their shadows, their whispers about transition and modern leadership. Now it was mine again, not Robert's, not theirs. My sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor as I brewed my coffee. Not the bitter motel sludge I'd choked down weeks ago. Real coffee ground fresh in my own French press. The scent curled through the air like freedom. At 9 a.m. Miss Avery stopped by. She stood in the doorway, surveying the space as though she were seeing it for the first time. "It feels like your house again," she said softly. "It is," I replied. "For the first time in 43 years. We sat at the table where Robert and I had once argued over budgets and laughed about Chloe's spelling tests. Only now it was covered in architectural sketches. My sketches. An art studio where Robert's study had been. A library in place of Chloe's dreamed-up wine cellar. Hardwood floors instead of the sterile tiles Daniel once pushed for. Avery glanced at the drawings. "You're really doing it." "Yes," I said firm. "I spent decades keeping this house the way Robert wanted it. Now it's time it reflected me." By noon, contractors were measuring walls, jotting notes. The sound of hammers would soon drown out the memory of Chloe's voice dripping with disdain. Retirement home candidate. At 2:15 p.m. my phone buzzed with a number from the federal prison system. I didn't answer. Chloe had written letters too, 17 of them, some begging, some bargaining. I burned the first 3 in the fireplace, then stopped opening the rest. Because forgiveness isn't free. And she hadn't earned it. By 4 o'clock, Sarah Chin, the financial advisor Carol had recommended, arrived for our quarterly review. She flipped through glossy reports, smiling. "Your portfolio is stable. The charitable foundation is fully funded. The first scholarships go out next month. The Margaret Whitfield Foundation for Elder Protection. My legacy. Funded with $15 million from Robert's clean inheritance. A lighthouse for seniors like me, mothers, grandmothers, who had been told they were useless, while their families plotted to strip them bare." "Netflix called again," Sarah added. "They're moving forward with the documentary. The Widow's Revenge. They want to start filming by spring." I laughed, shaking my head. Imagine that. Me on television telling the world how my own daughter tried to bury me. Sarah looked up, her gaze kind but sharp. "Do you regret any of it? The arrests, the estrangement, the headlines?" I thought about it. About Chloe's children, my grandchildren, caught in the crossfire. About Robert's double life as an informant, the secrets I'd uncovered in ledgers and files. About the lonely nights in the motel, the humiliation of being handed $200 in cash like a beggar. And then I thought about this moment. My coffee, my house, my foundation, my voice. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret a damn thing. They showed me who they were when they thought I was powerless. And I showed them who I am when I stopped letting them define me." Sarah smiled. "That's not terrible, Eleanor. That's inspiring." At 7 p.m. I walked through my house. Really looked at it. The art studio smelled faintly of turpentine from the easel I'd set up by the window. My library shelves gleamed, waiting to be filled with books I'd chosen, not Robert. I paused in front of a self-portrait I'd painted just weeks earlier. A woman standing in sunlight, head high, eyes unflinching. She didn't look like a grieving widow anymore. She looked like a queen. Because honey, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they swore you'd never be. As I poured myself a final glass of wine, the words echoed in my mind. The line that had carried me from pawn to queen. Family? Oh, that's DNA. Family are the people who fight for you when you're weak, not the ones who exploit your weakness for profit. I raised the glass, whispering to the empty house, to justice, to freedom, to becoming everything they underestimated. And if Chloe ever wanted to rebuild a bridge with me, she'd need more than prison letters. She'd need a transformation as complete as my own. Until then, I had work to do. Lives to protect. Stories to tell. So here's mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and tell me your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Because honey, I may be 68, but I've only just started playing the game.